It's time to talk Kansas City Chiefs football, or should I say Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs football on the Our Lads Football Network. And for the first time, we're going to introduce a new analyst to the network, managing editor at Chiefs Wire. He's been the managing editor now for, I guess, about 7-8 years. Charles Goldman. So, Charles, thanks for taking your time to talk to us for the first time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Happy to be here and talk some Super Bowl champion Chiefs football.
Oh yeah, just keep that going, right?
Yeah.
Relish that as much as you can. I know the feeling.
Yep.
Okay, so matter of fact, I'm responsible for like 11 teams in the draft guide report. Chiefs are one of them, but the other teams, it's like I'd say like 80% of them usually end up drafting in the top 10 every year. So I'm kind of busy with like, okay, what do this team needs? And they have so much to improve upon. But the Chiefs, that's the one team that it's always at the end of the draft. And it's a completely different way to preview their draft. But that doesn't mean, of course, that it's any less important. And matter of fact, even more important so when you're drafting towards the bottom of the draft every year. You really can't afford misses. You have to be able to hit it. And the Chiefs have done a really good job of doing that. And I think that's one of the things that kind of gets I don't know. It's I'm not saying it's fair or not, but there's Mahomes every time you talk about an Andy Reid, but nobody talks about the personnel decisions and nobody talks about Veach as much as I think they should.
Yeah, I think I got criticized like mid-season because I was saying like, look at what he did with this draft class last year. He should be up for, executive of the year. And people are like, and now, they win a Super Bowl on the backs of big performances from all these rookie defensive backs, from Isaiah Pacheco, Sky Moore scores a touchdown, and everyone's like, wow, look at this rookie class. And, he really accomplished something special this past year. Just really has done a remarkable job of shaping this roster into his own since he took over from John Dorsey.
And the interesting thing is, and I actually, we had our first mock draft about a month ago, and we don't even like putting the mock drafts out even that early, but we do it because it's wanted. It's something that fans like to take a look at, but they're really early projections. And the thing that I noticed just going over the Chiefs depth chart is that even though they're Super Bowl champs, there are a lot of different ways that Kansas City can go to improve their team. It's not just like, oh yeah, they got this one little hole here, and that's obviously what they have to. No, there's like 5 or 6 different positions, and especially when you do draft at the end of the round, a lot of times it is always best that you kind of go with the best available player. You don't want to be going into need, and I think if there's any particular draft that's going to be the case, it's going to be this year. I think it's going to just be one of those situations where, like, I could see them going a number of ways, especially on offense. Wide receiver might be the top need, and on defense, boy, that's the side of the ball that it looks like they can go pretty much in any direction.
Yeah, I get the sense that offense, we don't really know what's going to happen with Orlando Brown Jr., Andrew Wiley, both slated to hit free agency. They didn't use the franchise tag on Orlando Brown Jr. So I'd say like that from a Chiefs fan perspective, they're very anxious right now to see what's going to come of the offensive tackle position, because it's not like they have a lot of guys waiting in the wings. They have Lucas Yang, who's a former third-round draft pick, who has played some at right tackle, but he hasn't been able to prove that he can stay healthy yet at the NFL level. He opted out during the COVID year. Then he came back and he suffered an injury in Week 17 of the 2021 season, a knee injury. So he was working back from that this past year. Kind of fell down the depth chart because of that. But he's a guy that, he's in better shape now than he was before his injury. He's lost some weight, put on some good weight. He's someone that the Chiefs probably consider in the mix for the right tackle spot.
Okay.
But maybe more likely a swing tackle type of guy than your starter. He's someone you probably don't want to bank on right now. So then it's like, okay, well, we don't have an option at starter at left or right tackle, potentially with, free agency here on the horizon. So, what are you going to do? You're going to throw a bunch of, potential, free agent signings at left and right tackle. There's not really a big, deep class of those guys this year in free agency. Are you going to go out and re-sign Orlando Brown Jr. to that long-term deal that he's been seeking? Or are you going to re-sign Andrew Wiley to lock up that right tackle spot and then address the left tackle spot in the draft? Maybe there's just a lot of different ways that one can go, and I think that the Chiefs have seen how important it is to build through the trenches, both offensive and defensive side of the ball. So I get the sense that there's going to be a heavy emphasis there early in free agency and early in the draft as well.
Yeah, to tell you the truth, Charles, I felt that, or my idea was just look again. I'm not a Chiefs fan. It's the reason why we have you on. Is that all right? There's got cap space. There's the one glaring free agent that's sticking right in front of your face is that left tackle spot. Well, they have, especially with Wiley. Also, they got to take care of Orlando Brown, don't they? I mean, you would think that would be a no-brainer as somebody that doesn't cover the team as much as you do, but sounds like that is just a complete mystery. But you have to believe one of those two guys will be back, right? And then it would most likely be, okay, one guy comes back, which makes, instead of needing two tackles in the draft, you're only going to need to try to, draft one, whether it's early or not.
Right. And I still think, knowing that Brett Veach likes to have options and depth, I think it wouldn't be, beyond the realm of possibility that he goes out and he signs two tackles in free agency.
Free agency, okay.
Maybe one is a re-signing like Wiley or Orlando Brown Jr., and then maybe another is, someone that they think highly of that can play either or one position, play that kind of swing offensive line position, maybe a guy who has some flexibility to kick into guard as well, because, they also have Nick Allegretti, who's potentially leaving, who's been like a guard center backup lineman. So he's going to be a free agent, and he's probably starting caliber for other teams, right? So this is a guy that they're going to have to think about replacing too. So now you don't necessarily just have that need at tackle; you also have that need at interior depth. So maybe you're looking for a guy that can play, right tackle and play right guard, left guard. So that could be something else that they explore. But yeah, I wouldn't be shocked to see him, go after one or two guys in free agency, then also address the position in the draft. Really, throw some darts at it. Make sure you're addressing the position both short term and long term.
What is your guess, knowing this front office, knowing this coach, knowing Orlando Brown as best as you can? What's your guess tell you on whether or not you think he'll be back?
I don't think he'll be back. I get the sense that when he wasn't going to be franchise tagged again, that was the end of that. I think the teams you need to watch out for, obviously Chicago Bears. Ryan Poles is in the front office there now, former Chiefs executive, who had some part in bringing Orlando Brown to Kansas City in ahead of the 2021 NFL draft. And then, of course, probably, look at his history. His dad played for Bill Belichick with the Browns back in the day, I believe. And so maybe Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots are going to come after and give him this big offer. I think, the thing is, the Chiefs offered him a big contract last year when he was on the tag. Now, they didn't have as much runway and room for negotiating as they did this past year because he signed an agent late in the process. So when the Chiefs offered him that, there really wasn't much time to negotiate back and forth. He ended up declining the offer, and I think that kind of rubbed the Chiefs the wrong way because they thought they were going out of their way to make an offer, a long-term deal that was more than fair, offered him plenty of guaranteed money. And that was kind of the difference in opinion. He didn't feel that there was enough guaranteed money in the contract. And I think this year they started at that point again in negotiations. I think they said, hey, contract's still on the table. And this is a guy who's freshly a Super Bowl champion, who the offensive line didn't allow a single sack in the Super Bowl against one of the best defensive lines in the league. So now, they've got a little bit more leverage to say, hey, I want more, and I think I deserve more. And I think the Chiefs felt like this is where we are with our long-term offer. We want a solution for this long term. We're not going to put you on the franchise tag because we do not want to limit ourselves in free agency because immediately that's a $20 million cap hit
Sure.
that they have to account for. So I think that the idea was if we can't get a long-term deal done, we are going to pursue other avenues.
Okay.
And maybe there's a chance that he has a change of heart, that he's like, hey, Kansas City's where I want to be. Let's negotiate. But I think that, being the top perceived left tackle in this free agent class,
Yes.
he understands he can go out there and make whatever he wants to make.
Yeah.
And there's going to be, my concern with that and my thinking initially was, hey, there's some people out there that think this guy is a right tackle, not a left tackle. There are some teams out there who still think that, even with 2 seasons of him playing left tackle. But, we're talking he surrendered 10 sacks and over 100 pressures in those 2 seasons. Those aren't exactly like, all pro numbers.
That's
right?
true.
So
Yeah.
I think there are guys out there, teams out there, evaluators out there who still think his best spot is right tackle. But someone out there is going to think, hey, this guy can play left tackle in our scheme. And maybe I think maybe it's probably the Patriots or even, a team like the Bears. I feel like they have an offensive scheme that could kind of hide some of the limitations that he has.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And how often do we see it when a player gets tagged, they just don't return?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's bad blood or whatever the case may be, but it just seems like whenever a player's tagged, he rarely returns to that team. So maybe that's what we're going to see again with Orlando Brown. As far as the rest of the offense, so again, you mentioned Pacheco, huge season out of a 7th rounder, no question about it. You have 3 out of the 4 running backs, and if you want to include Burton, 4 out of the 5 on the roster that are free agents, or 3 out of the 5 that are free agents.
Yeah.
So when you take a look at that, is that obvious that they should either, you tell me, do you think they just go on the cheap, maybe try to bring back McKinnon and Burton and go from there, and they should be able to just bring those guys back into the fold again next season? Or do you think they might be looking for an upgrade?
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much an upgrade as just insurance, because you look at, say, Jerick McKinnon, like, he wasn't as effective during the playoffs as he was down the stretch because he had some injury issues going on. He had ankle injuries, both ankles. But he was out there gutting it out. He wasn't as effective in the passing game in those last couple of games. I'd say the last 4 games or so. And but he was, out there playing a role in pass protection. Had a couple of good runs, couple of good catches throughout the playoffs. But it was really the Isaiah Pacheco show. So I think if you're Kansas City, even if you bring Jerick McKinnon back, now keep in mind you have 1 more year of Clyde Edwards-Helaire on his rookie deal, but this is a guy who he wasn't at the Super Bowl parade with his teammates. Like he didn't go to the Super Bowl parade. He opted. He has obligation in New York. He was doing something with a brand for Fashion Week.
Okay.
So he's out there. And he's someone who was on injured reserve through the end of the year, and hasn't really been able to take off like a former 1st-round draft pick you think they would. He's been successful in spurts, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy. There's been some talks that teams believe he could possibly be acquired via trade. So then your depth gets even lessened,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
Then you're looking at Isaiah Pacheco and LaMichael Pirine, the only 2 guys under contract. And that is a little concerning. And I think that Jerick McKinnon, this is a guy who could be back. When he was released from the 49ers, he thought his career was over. The Chiefs were the only team who showed interest in him. And he comes to Kansas City, and now he's a Super Bowl champion. So I think if he wants to continue playing, he could potentially come back to Kansas City. I think they would be willing to give him maybe an incentive-heavy deal. Maybe it's not as much as he could maybe earn on the open market after the type of season that he had. But I think that there's going to be mutual interest there for something to get done. A name to watch in free agency is former Bears running back Montgomery.
Really?
Yeah, he was drafted by Matt Nagy, who's now offensive coordinator for Kansas City. There's been some chatter out there that he's a guy who could come in and play kind of a complementary role to what Isaiah Pacheco is. Work in the short yardage situation. He's a guy who, is above average in pass protection. He's got good hands. He's someone that I think the Chiefs could look into in free agency. And then there's always the chance that, hey, maybe there's a guy in undrafted free agency. Maybe there's a guy in the late rounds of the draft that they like, that they pick up, kind of bring in, have some competition at that position. But I do think that it's an underrated need for Kansas City. I don't think Chiefs fans are willing to admit it because, there's kind of been this big devaluation of the running back position over the years, and
Yep.
they don't want to invest any sort of draft capital
Sure.
in it. They don't want to invest any money in it.
Nor should they. Look what
Yeah,
happened.
right?
It worked. They drafted,
Right.
they used a 7th-round draft pick, and it worked.
But you got to remember that, availability is a big thing in the NFL, and
Yep.
the running back position is one of the toughest for guys to stay healthy at. And Isaiah Pacheco, he's a guy who's out here looking for contact, right?
Yep.
Like he doesn't avoid it; he's looking for it, and at some point, that's going to cost him some games. All right, it's only a matter of time. So I think if you're Kansas City, you're thinking that as well. You're thinking you need some insurance there. To kind of ensure that you have this 1-2 punch, or you have someone you can go to in case of an injury.
Okay. So if they sign, let's say they resign McKinnon, do you think they still go into the draft and say, okay, we're now into the 3rd or the 4th round area? If the right guy shows up from here on, we might take him. Or if they resign McKinnon, do you think that just becomes, unless they trade Edwards-Helaire, yeah, you know what? I think we're okay for next season.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend mostly on the Edwards-Helaire situation, because I
Okay.
know that there are people within the Chiefs coaching staff who are still strong believers in his ability. I mean, the guy had 6 touchdowns this season, and that was tied for 3rd on the team in terms of touchdowns. Like he's an effective player in a specific role. I think the problem is that the Chiefs envisioned a much larger
Yeah.
role for him initially, and I think he's not that player. Specifically because of the injuries, the things that he's dealt with, he is not that player right now. And I think if he wants to go somewhere else, I think that they will explore that option. I think they would have to be kind of not necessarily blown away by an offer, but would have to receive a fair offer for him, knowing that he's a former 1st-round draft pick. I think there would be some, potentially some incentive to get that deal done before the deadline for the 5th-year option. Right. So maybe in the next couple of days, we'll hear something about
Okay.
that.
All right.
Because then, if a team, gets him and wants that extra year of control, that's a possibility. Maybe there's something to be said about, Eric Bieniemy, who's out in Washington now. Maybe he wants to get one of his guys in the room.
True.
So
point.
that could be a possibility. But we'll just kind of see how that plays out. But I feel like they're going to be adding to this room at some point, even if they bring Jerick McKinnon back.
Okay. Also, as far as the skill positions, now at some point, maybe it's another couple of years, I don't know, but at some point, Travis Kelce is going to start slowing down. And not only that, but he could get hurt. You get older, you're more prone to getting hurt. And it's such an important spot for this passing game. Do you think that they have the right guys in case that were to happen? The worst thing possible, there's an injury. It's time to start developing a guy, because sometimes, especially a tight end, it could take 2 or 3 years to develop these guys. Yeah. So do you think it's time yet to start taking a look in the middle rounds for the future Travis Kelce?
Look, I think that Noah Gray, who's been in the offense a couple of years, I think he's really underrated. He showed up in some big moments for this team this year.
Okay.
So I think he's a guy who, if Kansas City, if Kansas City ran into a situation where they had an injury with Travis Kelce, I think they have some guys right now who could step in, who could be effective in, whether he's out for a couple of games or what have you, who could be effective in that role. They have some younger guys who could develop. there's a fellow, oh, I'm forgetting his name, out of BYU who Matt Bushman,
Oh
who
yeah.
he was on the 90-man roster last offseason. He had a great game, the last preseason game, but he broke his clavicle and ended up cut on injured reserve, cut from injured reserve before the season started. They brought him back on the practice squad about mid-year, and you know they have him on a reserve future deal now, I believe. And he's a guy who I would watch in terms of development to potentially be
Okay.
that guy. Jody Fortson, I believe, is a restricted or an exclusive rights free agent. He's someone that I know the team's very high on, but he does have a new agent. I'm not sure if they're going to bring him back on a restricted free agent contract.
Okay.
This is a deep class for tight ends,
Yes. Yes.
right? So
Absolutely.
if there's a class to maybe like grab a guy even later in the draft, I think this is probably the one to do it.
Okay.
I could see them, in a class that's not considered super deep at the wide receiver position. I could see them even going tight end before they think about going and picking up a receiver.
Wow. Okay.
So that's something to consider. I know that they've met with some of the top guys. I think they had a formal interview with Utah's Dalton Kincaid. So
Oh yeah.
there are definitely some guys that they're looking at that they could be interested in at that position. I think anytime you have an opportunity to get a dynamic pass catcher for Patrick Mahomes, whether it is a running back, tight end, receiver,
Yes.
you don't pass that up.
Yeah. I just mentioned a name, Kincaid. I could see guys that are just dialed in scouts, and I know Dave Seifertson, our lead scout at our lads, and I absolutely love this kid. And as Dave was talking about how often most of the draft experts say didn't even have him like in the first round for a long time. And now that they're starting to get a look at him, they're starting to realize just how dangerous a weapon he could be in the NFL. I can just imagine if he gets drafted by the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, how that's gonna go. So,
Yeah.
wide receiver. So, Juju's a free agent and Hardman's a free agent. Now, Hardman has been underwhelming, hasn't he? For a second-round draft pick, he just hasn't really delivered the way that the team would have hoped. They drafted Sky Moore last year, so I'm sure there's big expectations on his development. Tony's there, so that's good. But still, do you think even though Valdez-Scantling is back and Tony and Moore, do they just go back and re-sign Juju? Do you think he's going to want to come back? And I don't know why he wouldn't.
I think that there's going to be some mutual interest there, but I think it's all going to come down to money. And I think the Chiefs kind of learned last season, moving on from Tyreek Hill, that they can throw numbers at this position and find success.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
They don't necessarily need to have that number one guy. They just need to have a lot of guys, a lot of depth, and specifically have guys who can beat man coverage, because teams are going to be paying a ton of attention to Travis Kelce. And if you have, some of these guys who line up against a 2 or a 3 corner and can beat single man coverage, like, you're going to find success in this offense. So I think, if Juju's not back, you've got some options. In free agency, you've got some options. In the draft, some of these late round guys who are intriguing athletes who you could bring in and try to coach them up throughout the season. You don't necessarily need guys who are ready right away when you've got Sky Moore, MVS, and Tony kind of in the fold already.
Yep.
If you can coach like a day 4 guy up, get like a Charlie Jones out of Purdue, or Mingo out of Ole Miss, or one of these guys who's a plus athlete, who can kind of fill a specific role in an offense, and who can be coached up by that midseason point. I think you're going to find some success. You're getting a lot of veterans who are cut here ahead of free agency.
True. Yep.
You got Robert Woods. You got Thielen, who was cut today. You've got a bunch of guys who aren't. I mean, they're potentially not going to count against the compensatory pick formula, so that's a bonus for Brett Veach, especially if a guy like Juju walks in free agency. You don't want to cancel out that pick, right?
That's right.
So I think that the goal, and while they say they want to keep as the same group of pass catchers, I think the goal is always going to be make sure you have the numbers. If you can draft a guy and he becomes the next superstar receiver in your offense, great. If not, and he's just someone who can contribute and be kind of that piece that you need down the line, I think that's going to be just as good.
Okay. Let's turn. Oh, by the way, before we turn our attention to the defense, Bouchel, is he the
Yes.
future backup?
I think they wouldn't have invested so much time in him if they didn't believe he could be that guy.
Yeah.
I think he's going to get every opportunity to be.
Okay.
I mean, he was on the roster all last year. The year before, he was on it for most of the year. I think like half of the season. So I think that's a guy that they expect to come in this year and take that job.
Okay.
There's gonna be competition. They have another quarterback on the roster. Oh shoot, I'm forgetting his name. Chris Oladokun.
Yes. Okay. Is that the Ivy Leaguer?
Yeah, I think did he play at South Dakota State? Maybe?
Yes, that's right. South Dakota State, not the Ivy Leaguer. Yes.
Yeah.
That's the FCS dude.
Yeah. He played at South Dakota State.
Yeah.
I think he's kind of like a dual threat type of guy, and he played that role this past offseason on the scout team for them. Andy Reid always likes those guys who have that type of ability. So maybe that's the type of guy you got to look out for, in the draft this year or in undrafted free agency, maybe a Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Maybe they go after Aiden O'Connell, who has a relationship with Patrick Mahomes' personal trainer, Bobby Stroop. They've worked together before, so maybe that's a guy they bring into the fold. Maybe they go after a veteran. Andy Reid likes having at least one veteran guy in the quarterback room. I'm of the opinion that Patrick Mahomes has earned the right to be that guy now. It doesn't need another veteran in his ear, especially when you have a guy like Matt Nagy as offensive coordinator who can come in and be like, kind of be that guy, can be that presence in Mahomes' ear, having been a former quarterback himself. So I think that's probably something that, if they can find a veteran on the right money, it's got to be all it comes down to money. If they can find a guy who wants to come in, work with Patrick Mahomes on cheap, maybe like a veteran salary benefit type deal, that could be something to explore.
But do you think that's only if they're not as comfortable with Bouchel as they would like to be?
I think
if he does a really good job, no matter what, you think they're going to add?
I think no matter what, they're going to add someone else to the mix. They like to go to camp with 4 quarterbacks. They got the 3 right now. So that'll either come after the draft or maybe in free agency. And I think they would add someone, even consider adding a veteran because they want to push Bouchel. They want him to earn the job. They don't want to give him the job. They want him to earn it.
Okay.
I personally thought that he did enough to earn it last year, but Chad Henne wanted to come back for another year, and thank goodness he did because we needed him in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I think that they'll probably explore a couple different options there.
All right. Now on defense, it's a few guys that are free agents. Thornhill, Dunlap, and your defensive tackle, Derek Nottie, is also a free agent. So is Saunders. Yeah. It looks to me like, and I don't know what their plan is at defensive tackle with those free agents, but it does look like they could use another player, like a quality player alongside Chris Jones.
Yeah, a lot of people are kind of waiting for a Chris Jones extension right now.
Okay.
They're kind of expecting the Chiefs to do that to free up some cap space. I don't know if that'll come before free agency. I know that they've been talking, that the two sides have been talking. So we'll kind of see what comes of that. No matter what happens there, though, they do absolutely need some more bodies at defensive tackle. Now, at the Combine, another company I work with, KC Sports Network, they interviewed Chiefs defensive line coach Joe Cullen, and he was talking about Colin Saunders like he was already coming back. Okay. So I don't know if that's the case, but I know that he's one of his favorite players and that's a guy that he probably wants back.
Okay.
Derek Nottie, he signed late in free agency last year with Kansas City on like a cheap 1 year deal. So I'm thinking that maybe he comes back on the same type of deal. But who knows?
Okay.
I do think they could upgrade their depth there, whether that's through the draft and what happens with Chris Jones could shape how that looks. Are you drafting a guy who is potentially a future replacement for Chris Jones? Or are you drafting a guy who is a complement to Chris Jones?
Okay.
So I think, if you get an extension done with him ahead of the draft, then you're thinking, okay, I don't necessarily need a replacement. I can go ahead and find a guy I can pair with him in this rotation of guys that I have to find some success either as a run stopper or pass rusher, what have you.
And it could be both.
And it could be both.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, Karlaftis was the big pick last year. How do you think, and with Clark being cut, how do you think they're going to look this year? Because it does appear that they're going to need a little bit more help. Dunlap also being a free agent, appears like they're going to need a little bit more help on the edge because obviously Karlaftis is just still kind of a pup. How did you think he developed, first of all? And second of all, is this a big need for them?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big need. Karlaftis, I think they're hoping that he comes out and picks up where he left off. I mean, the last 10 games, he had 6.5 sacks. He was getting more pressures. Things were really coming together for him. And then, Frank Clark, obviously, that's a guy brings just a tremendous amount of veteran leadership. Always showed up in the playoffs, was off and on during the regular season, had some injury troubles and whatnot. I know that they love him. They want to bring him back.
Okay.
Even after cutting him. If he doesn't find what he's looking for on the open market, I don't think that is off the table. Now, being on the open market, lots of teams value that veteran leadership. Maybe someone will see him and offer him something that the Chiefs can't match or the Chiefs don't want to match. So at that point, then you got to kind of move on. I think there's going to be some veteran options out there. There's some weird stuff going on with Zadarius Smith, who is someone that, the Chiefs had interest in last year. If they could get him out of the Vikings on a trade or, if he's released, that could be an intriguing option free agency for them. He has some familiarity with Joe Cullen when Cullen was at Baltimore, when Smith was at Baltimore. So that could be a guy that they could bring into the mix. There's going to be some other veteran edge rushers who get released. I think, I saw something about Rams and Leonard Floyd. I mean, there are going to be some options out there, and I think they'll play around in that market a little bit. But at the same time, I think that Brett Veach knows that there's a value in, developing some of these younger guys and getting them into the mix and finding them, having them on that, long-term type of contract. I know they met with Nolan Smith and some other guys at the combine. So they're clearly looking at potential high draft pick.
When you run a 4-3, you better have edge rushers.
Right. And I think that we're going to see them make an investment at the edge rusher position, both, either early in free agency or
end of the draft.
Or the end of the draft. I think they're gonna, it's almost the same strategy as I think they're taking with the offensive tackle position. Throw some darts, no matter what. Make sure you have a stable of guys.
Yeah, because if you look at the draft, this is definitely, besides Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson, who might both go in the top 10, I don't care what the mock draft boards look like. There's a big gap between those two and the rest. And that might be actually a pretty decent situation for the Chiefs, because if they do target an edge rusher with their first pick, well, they're going to land a guy that was probably rated right around where they're going to draft. So, they're not going to have to reach for him. They're not going to, so they're going to be about 4 or 5 guys that are probably still going to be available for them to take. So I think that does make a lot of sense. What about, the linebacker situation? Because I know this isn't, when you take a look at the Chiefs defense, I know linebacker is not like, you have a Nick Bolton, and that's a big deal.
If I had to rank one position as the group that is the most secure, stable, doesn't have needs, it's linebacker.
Yeah.
That said, you have contracts coming up. You're gonna have
Okay.
Willie Gay next year. You're gonna have Nick Bolton. So if there's a guy you like and he comes up in the draft, right? I don't know that they're going to be in the market to pay anyone in free agency this year because the linebacker market, personally, in my opinion, a little bit absurd over the past couple of years. Like guys have been earning like big money, and I'm just not sure that they're ready to pay that out yet when they've got Bolton coming up in 2 years, someone who they really like for their defense.
Yep.
But I think that, with Willie Gay coming up next year, you're going to have L'Jarius Sneed coming up next year. So I think that if there's a guy on your draft board that's you think is comparable, can play that same role, maybe you get a year's head start.
Okay.
Right? Maybe you get a year's head start and add that guy to the mix. I know that, man, the Chiefs were really pleased with the way that Leo Chenal played in that last game in the Super Bowl. I think he played just over a dozen snaps on defense, but every single one of them he made an impact. Specifically,
How so?
Knifing through in the run game, just a really sound gap integrity.
Okay.
He's a guy that I think that they're going to develop him into having some more specific roles on the defense this year.
Yep.
I'm thinking like this is a guy that even can maybe be like a dedicated pass rusher on certain downs that you can kind of throw in there in the edge rusher position. He's got the size, he's got the tenacity to do it. So we'll just we'll see how that kind of works.
Yeah, talented kid, no question about it. Good pick in the third round. And then finally, the secondary. So look, everybody knows because the staff even said it, and I think Veach might have even said it, that it was maybe a little bit surprising in a really good way that their young late round draft picks actually played as well as they did. Not that they played like all pros, but they didn't have to. They just had to not play poorly, like they were completely out of rhythm, and there's too big of a stage, and it wasn't the case. So, but being that's the deal. Do you still think that? Well, all right, they got away with it last year. Thornhill's a free agent; he's at safety. I get that, but cornerback. Unless they've re-signed Thornhill, cornerback though is definitely got to be a need.
Yeah, I think that cornerback it just depends. If L'Jarius Sneed is a guy that you see yourself re-signing in a year, I think you probably can sit on cornerback, which is disappointing because this is a great cornerback class in the draft. For free agency, like there's probably going to be some deals to be had because of that fact. Right. So you can never have enough cornerbacks, but the Chiefs are probably at least 4 players deep there right now with Sneed, Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams. And then maybe if you even include the 7th round draft pick as well.
Johnson.
Najee Johnson. He's a guy who really emerged, as a key player on special teams. Right now, I would say he's entering the next season as one of the Chiefs' top special teamers.
Okay.
So he's a guy who's probably going to make the roster just off of that alone. So you maybe have the room to add one more guy at that spot. I think right now safety is probably the bigger need, knowing how much the Chiefs play 3 safeties, knowing that there's a section of the NFL that's going to believe that Juan Thornhill is the second best safety on the free agent market behind who is it? Jesse Bates.
Yes.
I think he's probably considered the top guy. So I think that, you're probably bracing to lose Thornhill. And if you lose Thornhill, you're going to have to work on replacing him through the draft or free agency. And
they don't think Cook's ready.
I think Cook is ready. But you're going to have that third guy.
And a veteran guy, more than likely.
Maybe a veteran guy, maybe not. We'll kind of see. I think a veteran guy is a possibility. But it's just you got to have the 3 guys who can be out there, not just for the depth, but just because they like to run three safeties. They have that big nickel package that they like to run. And I think, Cook, I think he's ready enough, right?
That'll work.
Is he ready to be an impact player? I don't know. So we'll find out about that. But I think, having those three safeties who can be interchangeable, maybe having a fourth guy who can play special teams, that's something you got to look at if you're Kansas City.
I know Joyner's available now, being a
Yeah.
Jet fan after the Clark trade,
Yeah.
so they're not going to bring him back. Okay. So overall, though, the special teams looks like it's set. Everybody else is coming back, so it does, and they're in good shape all across the board on special teams.
I will say Tommy Townsend, restricted free agent.
Okay.
Um, are they going to tender him? Are they going to extend him?
Okay.
Are they going to let him walk? I mean, he was a weapon. He was considered team captain during the playoffs this past year. He was he earned first team All Pro selection as a punter. So this is a guy that, good player. I don't know if you're the Kansas City Chiefs. Do you need to have an all pro punter on your roster? I mean, you
Maybe
probably
not.
want to. Do you need to pay him, though?
No.
So I think that's going to be something that they're going to have to, maybe get a look at and consider. So maybe they could be dabbling in the punter market during the draft, during free agency. We'll kind of see there.
Before I let you go, Charles, is there anybody, you mentioned Bushman and the quarterback, is there anybody to keep an eye on that you think could be on the verge of being at least a role player and somebody, and maybe even more than that, that's on reserve right now?
I will say there are two intriguing receivers with the last name Ross. You've got Justin Ross, wide receiver out of Clemson, who had the injury issues.
Yes.
Last year he had a foot that landed him on injured reserve. I know Patrick Mahomes was a big fan of his before he got injured during camp. Knows that he has the ability. It's just a question: can he stay healthy? Can he carve out a role? We'll kind of find that out this offseason. He's someone to watch. Then there is former first-round pick by the Cincinnati Bengals, John Ross, who's a speedster. I think, when you consider that the Chiefs are likely to lose Mecole Hardman, right? There's a possibility that a player like Ross serves a role.
Okay.
Maybe that role isn't, understood or fully envisioned right away when the season starts. Maybe he starts off the year on the practice squad or something like that and ends up getting called up as, and is a depth player of sorts. It's just going to all depend on how the rest of the receiver group shakes out. But those are two guys that I would certainly watch on the offensive side of the ball. On the defense, they picked up was it Daniel Wise, former KU Jayhawk. He's a defensive lineman. He's someone that I would keep an eye on, that I know the team has liked for some time. Potentially starts off as a practice squatter as well. But he's a guy who could be a key depth piece throughout, a 18 game, season.
Okay.
Throughout a long season.
Yeah, and that kid from Iowa, the receiver, I know he had a pretty good, a pretty decent career at Iowa, and being a Jet.
He's someone that they could certainly develop. You're talking Amir Smith-Marset?
Correct.
Yeah. He's a player that they could certainly develop. I know they liked at the end of the season what they're seeing from him on special teams. They called him up a couple times in the postseason and late in the season from the practice squad. So he's a guy that I expect to also play kind of that role, and it's going to be key depth throughout the off season, off-season workouts and what have you. Another guy that probably should keep an eye on, Cornell Powell. I mean, he's been on the roster for a couple of years now. I feel like it's getting to the point where, like, if he doesn't make the team, I don't know that he ever will.
Okay.
Right? So, maybe that's a guy that in his third year, is someone who's more trusted, who works his way into the lineup and has a role on offense and special teams.
Yeah, he was what, 5th-round draft pick?
I believe he's a 5th-round draft pick.
Yeah. So that's a talented player, and even LaMichael Pirine, I get the feeling the way that he was going. I know injuries kind of hurt him with the Jets, but I know the way he was going in his final training camp last year, that it just became a numbers game. That they had just kind of exhausted his chances there. So I wouldn't, I think he's young enough where I wouldn't. And even Ely, he was an intriguing SEC performer.
He turned into a CJ Spiller for the Chiefs again this year. He was on and off the practice squad more often than anything else.
Yes.
But
So
yeah, he's a guy. Special teams are for both of these guys.
yeah,
That is the way onto the roster in Kansas City. Dave Tobe has a ton of say over the bottom of the roster. If you're a guy who's going to make this team on the bottom of the roster, you've got to play special teams.
no question about it, because there was a lot of people who thought that Tobe might be a head coach one day, but it looks like that ship has probably sailed. You think?
We'll see. I think what he did this last year. Early on the season, the team was they saw a lot of turnover on special teams. They really struggled in that area, and then look at what happens with Sky Moore in the postseason. He has these two big kick returns that are key points in the AFC title game and the Super Bowl as well. And this guy who muffed three punts, or he had two muffs and a fumble or something like that.
Yeah.
It seemed like they were kind of forcing him into that role, but they kept working on it with him, and suddenly he becomes a game changer for them at that position in that role. So I think that stuff like that doesn't go unnoticed. And I don't think that the ship has set sail for Tobe. I don't think it's set sail for the defensive coordinator, for Steve Spagnuolo, either. I think both of them still have those aspirations kind of in the back of their minds.
Good for them.
I think that one day that they will potentially get that opportunity.
And
Whether
they should.
Maybe that's in Kansas City, maybe it's elsewhere. You never know.
Could be. And yeah, they deserve it. So they've done a great job. And we've seen enough head coaching candidates and hires that just make you go, huh?
Yeah.
What did they do? And like even the one the one in Arizona, it's like when I heard that they hired the dude, I was like, you sure you don't want to take that one back after what happened in the Super? You sure about that? Yeah. So I don't know. It just shows you though. It's there's guys that deserve it, and I probably should, and I know we it's not really the show to do it, but I should ask you before I let you go about what did you think about the whole Eric Bieniemy thing?
Yeah, I think that I'm happy for him that he decided and understood and recognized that this was the best opportunity for him to move his career forward, to really put his own mark on an offense, even though he put his own mark on Kansas City's offense that I think is going to be sorely missed. He's a strong leader, and I think he's going to change the culture around of that team for the better.
Okay.
And I think that Washington fans should be really excited about the hire, and they're going to see, I think, an immediate change. Just maybe on-field success might come a little bit slowly. There might be a building process there, but I think they're going to see an immediate change in culture and how the team functions. He's just it's interesting because you hear guys like Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes during the Super Bowl, the YouTube videos from the NFL afterwards where they're all mic'd up and whatnot.
Okay.
You're hearing some of the things that Eric Bieniemy has told the media week in and week out. Some of these phrases, these platitudes of football that he kind of lives by.
Okay.
You're hearing Patrick Mahomes get the guys fired up in the huddle using these same phrases. You're hearing Travis Kelce use these same phrases on the sideline with guys to get them fired up for the game. So they're going to miss his leadership. They're going to miss his leadership. And I think in Kansas City, it's going to be seen beyond, him being there, right? Like we're going to feel that leadership that he has left behind through guys like Kelce, through guys like Patrick Mahomes. He's had that impact on them.
Well, it is the best thing for him. This will give him that shot away from the organization, no matter how bad of an interview he must be, that if this is his chance now.
Did you hear his opening press conference? There's no way that thing about him being a bad interview is real. It's just not. I mean, having talked to him myself and listened to him speak for a couple of years now, there's just no shot.
Do you think it had to do with his, not that you would think 20 years later it wouldn't matter, but does that have anything to do with it?
I don't know. I don't think it has as much to do with it as, NFL owners kind of being, set in their ways and, having an idea of who they want to hire, but before even maybe interviewing people. I know that happens, quite frequently that, they get an idea in mind of, hey, this is the guy that I want to go after, and they go after them hard, and maybe they don't leave enough room for a guy like Bieniemy to come in and convince them, hey, I can be that guy.
All right.
So I think it's more of a systemic issue with how the NFL goes about their dealings and head coaching hirings than I think it is anything else.
All right. Well, I'm sure if he keeps going the way he's going, he'll get his shot. So,
Yeah,
and you got your shot here, Charles, and I appreciate it. Not that you needed one, but I appreciate you taking the time to educate me and the viewers on the Kansas City Chiefs heading into free agency and the draft. And I look forward to the opportunity, hopefully, to talk to you after the draft and beyond. Congratulations, being a fan of a team that wins a Super Bowl. I don't care what people say. It's important. You can't win without the fans. So congratulations. I'm sure there's a lot of fun covering the team winning another Super Bowl championship. And we look forward to talking to you again real soon.
absolutely. Can't wait.